This is the I Don't Want a Divorce podcast with Dr. David E. Clarke. Okay, this is my final podcast on being a good husband. Ladies, I'd like you to listen to this too, but these are podcasts. If they don't listen to any others in this series, your husband, if they listen to this, it'll give them a good template, a biblical template for being a good husband. Because most men don't have a clue what they're doing. I didn't when I got married. And the role I'm covering today is probably the most difficult for a husband. It's being a leader. Very few men get any training in leadership as they grow up. Maybe your dad was largely absent. Maybe your mom was the leader. Maybe your dad was a lousy example of a leader. Anyway, you get married and you have no idea how to be a leader. And God says clearly, be a leader. Listen to Ephesians 5:22 through 24. The Apostle Paul talking here. This is clear. Paul says, "Wives, be subject to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church, he himself being the Savior of the body. But as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives ought to be to their husbands in everything." Well, that's a pretty clear message, isn't it? Headship equals leadership. God gave us as husbands the job of leader in the marriage relationship and in the home. More husbands fail in this area than in almost any other. Why? Because being a leader is difficult. I see two main leadership failures in husbands. The first one is the tyrant, the dictator. This is the man that makes all the decisions, controls everything, and gets no input from his wife. Okay, that's not leadership. That's dictatorship. The other example, and frankly, this was my problem in my marriage initially, is what I call the wimp, who forces really, his wife to lead and make all the decisions. He backs off. He abdicates all responsibility. He works at his job. He may even be a leader at his job there, but he does nothing at home to lead. Again, not the biblical model. How do we figure out the right way to lead our wives? By looking at Jesus. As in every area of life, we need to follow the example Christ set when he walked the earth. Here are some ideas from Jesus. To be a biblical leader, we must lead as Christ led. In Matthew 20, chapter 20, verses 25 through 28, Jesus summed up his entire leadership style. Listen to this. "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. It is not this way among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave. Just as the Son of Man," speaking of himself, "did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." One of the most powerful illustrations of Christ's commitment to lead by serving appears in chapter 13 of the Gospel of John, verses 3 through 5. Listen to this passage and try to picture in your mind what Jesus is doing. And it is extraordinary. Jesus, this is the God of the universe. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and they had come forth from God and was going back to God. This is speaking of his coming crucifixion and resurrection. This is Jesus, got up from supper, laid aside his garments, and taking a towel, he girded himself. Then he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. Can you imagine this scene? Jesus Christ is washing the disciples' dirty, dust-covered feet, and these men walked everywhere. Disgusting. This is literally the King of the universe, Jesus Christ himself, washing smelly, dust-covered feet that likely stunk worse than your gym bag after you stow it in the corner of your closet for a month. Why? Why would he do this? Because that's what a leader does. The bottom line is this. Christ, God and Savior, was and is a servant leader, one who leads by identifying the needs of others and meeting them. Husbands are to be servant leaders, leading their wives by serving them. Men, if you lead by serving, your woman will follow you anywhere. If you serve your wife faithfully by meeting her needs, it makes it easier for her to submit to you. It makes it easier for her to support you in a decision with which she disagrees. It makes it easier for her to love and respect you. And it makes it easier for her to meet your needs. Here are a few practical ways you can be a servant leader. And again, you'll find more in my book, Married But Lonely. But let me cover a few of these. Method number 1, do your share of the household chores. Men, don't do only the bare minimum. I used to do that as a husband. No, do more than you have to do. This is the most obvious way to be a servant leader. Can you imagine Jesus living in a home and not lifting a finger? Sitting on the couch all day? Avoiding jobs whenever possible? No way. Now, I know you think you have your wife's welfare in mind when you don't do much around the house. After all, you are trying to prepare her for widowhood. Right. In truth, you are just being selfish and lazy. I know, because that's how I used to be. Sit down with your wife today and create a fair list of who does what in the home, and make sure she thinks it's fair, not you think it's fair. And keep in mind, household chores are not her jobs that you are helping her do. They are both your jobs. In fact, as a leader, they're your responsibility to make sure they get done, not hers. I don't care if you work outside the home and she's at home. It doesn't make any difference. A fair, balanced list of needs is important. Just like my wife, Sandy, my beautiful blonde, your wife wants to be part of a team. The condition of her house, her home, is extremely important to her, and she needs your help to keep it clean and in order. Ask your wife every day what chores need to be done. Do your part by completing regular jobs faithfully and asking her about extra ways you can be of service. She will feel closer to you. She will follow you. She will also devote more time and energy to you. It will work. Method number 2 in terms of being a leader is meet her needs. This is what a servant does. If you fail to meet your wife's needs, you are not fulfilling your responsibilities as a servant leader. Remember, it is not your duty to meet all of her needs, just the needs a husband can meet. Unlike Jesus, you don't know what her needs are. Don't assume you automatically know. You will be wrong. The only way to find out is to ask her daily, more than once, about needs. Your wife is an emotional, unpredictable creature, and so her needs will change throughout the day. Ask her in the morning before you go to work. Honey, what can I do for you? What are your needs? Call her at lunchtime and ask her again. Honey, just checking in here. Text, email, phone call. What can I do for you? Anything change? Need something from me? When you get home from work, ask her again. You know how many men actually even ask once a day what their wife's needs are? Very, very few. We're talking single digits in percentage. Be one of those guys. Make it clear to your wife that you're not just willing to do chores. You want to know about her physical, emotional, and spiritual needs, the whole enchilada. Just asking communicates love and concern, but following through is even better. So don't ask unless you intend to do something. Do what I do when I ask Sandy what her needs are. To make certain I don't forget, I jot them down on my pad so I won't disappoint her. You can put it in your phone. Make sure you keep a record or you're going to forget. Okay, method number 3 in terms of being a leader. Include her in decisions. Many men make this mistake. I know I have. Always, always, always ask your wife for input before any significant decision. If you're not sure of its significance, then ask her. It is demeaning, insulting, and a failure in servant leadership to make any important decision without first consulting your wife. To put the shoe on the other foot, how would you feel if she went out and bought a family sedan without even telling you she planned to do it? You need to consider her viewpoint, wisdom, and intuition. After all, she is your equal partner in this relationship, not someone you can boss around as king. Besides, how can you expect her to support you in a decision that she has no part in making? And it doesn't make any difference if it's a good decision. You might think the thing through, even pray about it, get some input from a mentor. You make a great decision, but if you've left your wife out, it is not a good decision because she's left out. Also involve her in household finances. She needs to know where every penny is going. Make financial decisions together. Major purchases, developing a budget, investments, and tithing all require her input every single time. When Sandy and I sit down to make any investment decision, we talk and pray about it first. We have a financial advisor we know and trust, but we talk about it. If we're going to make a big purchase, we talk about it. Now, whether your wife has an accounting degree or relies on you to pay bills, balance the checking account and manage the credit and debit card statements is irrelevant. It doesn't make a difference. I know husbands who tell their wives absolutely nothing about their financial situation. Why? Is this top secret information? Are you in the CIA? Tell her. Keep her involved. Plus, as a practical matter, if you're incapacitated or you die, She won't have a clue about the money, and it's a nightmare for her. Now, let me give you a final challenge, men, as I wrap up these series of podcasts on being a husband. Look, I know you love your wife. Now you must learn to love her the way she needs to be loved, the way I have described in these podcasts on being a good husband. Frankly, the way God says to love her, to be a godly man, to be a lover, to be a romancer, and to be a leader. Man, it's a lot to take in, I know. It's not going to be easy to carry out these 4 roles. You need help to do it. That's why I wrote the book, Married But Lonely. I'm telling you, I recommend you purchase the book. Your wife would be thrilled. Can you imagine? If you buy a marriage book, I was listening to these podcasts, honey, and I like this guy, and it makes sense, and it's biblical, and he's got experience. He's written a book called Married But Lonely, and let's go through that book together. That would be astronomically good for your marriage. Up to you. Now, on my website, davideclarke.phd.com, Clarke with an E, I have all kinds of resources for your marriage. Books, podcasts, videos, focus on the family video interviews, my YouTube channel, phone advice, marriage intensives, individual intensives. I've got a plan that will help you. Before I move on to the next step in my Married But Lonely strategy, I want to take a little detour and talk about divorce and what it will cost you. Following my Married But Lonely steps will help you avoid the high cost of divorce and give you a happy, intimate marriage. So next time I'll talk about the high cost of divorce. I'm talking to everybody who's listening to this podcast, but if you know someone who's contemplating divorce or their spouse is, ask them to listen to this next podcast on the high cost of divorce.